Hello, this is the Lord's Legion and welcome to a brand new movie review. And as you can see, the MCU wasn't the only franchise that did have its full-on conclusion, so to speak, but we have also witnessed the end of the X-Men film series, or at the very least this last film from the current continuity. And as you can see, the final chapter within the X-Men saga is of course Dark Phoenix. As to which this is technically the second time that this series has actually tackled the Dark Phoenix Saga. But the real question is Dark Phoenix a better retelling of the Dark Phoenix Saga, or is it that this movie is that bad that even X-Men The Last Stand is a better version of the Phoenix storyline? Without further ado, let's begin with this review. Now, going into Dark Phoenix, my expectations for this movie was relatively low given that this movie had suffered from a lot of behind the scenes drama. And given that this film was initially intended to be in two parts, the fact that they decided to change it into one film was a major red flag within itself. And walking out of this movie, I can safely say that X-Men Dark Phoenix is better than X-Men Apocalypse. But that's about the only praise I can really give this film. Because my god, X-Men Dark Phoenix is a huge clusterfuck. And for the life of me, I don't even know why this movie even exists, because it is no better than X-Men The Last Stand, nor even any worse for that matter. And the reason why I say this is because when you do reflect on both movies, they're pretty much exactly the same, with the only real difference being that Dark Phoenix had a few cosmic elements sprinkled here and there. And like I said, Dark Phoenix isn't any better or any worse than The Last Stand. Granted, there are some good ideas for this movie to be good, but given that they rushed every single thing and crammed it into one movie, it pretty much has the exact same problems as The Last Stand. And as for the characters in this film, most of them are completely half-assed. Because we have Charles Xavier, who for some reason is a complete dickhead in this movie, who is so far up his own ass and just doesn't even accept the fact that he is wrong until the last act of the movie. And it just goes completely against the character and his beliefs. To the point where at some point I was convinced that he was the main villain of this movie. And that maybe they would do something with him as Onslaught, but you know, apparently that's just too out there for Fox. And clear as day, you could just tell that James McAvoy was just phoning it in just for the sake of a paycheck. Which is sad to say because he's a really good actor and is a fine Charles. But as you can see, he just didn't give one. And then we also have Michael Fassbender as Magneto, and this guy can't even do a bad performance even if he tried. And despite the fact that his character arc was completely recycled from previous films, he was still the best character in Dark Phoenix. And no matter how bad the scripts may be, Fassbender will always give his all in any role. The only other character I liked in this movie was Beast, and Nicholas Hoult did a really good job with the character. Beast has always been one of my favourite X-Men, and it was great to see that he was finally gonna get his time to shine. Plus, to this movie's credit, it did take him in a completely unique direction, even if the execution is a lot wonky. And then we also have Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique, and she is pretty much what you would expect at this point. Though near the first act they decide to do something with this character in which, if you've seen any of the trailers, then you know exactly what happens to her. Then as for Sophie Turner as Jean Grey, I just felt nothing for her completely. And to be honest, I don't know if it's either the weak script or the fact that Sophie Turner isn't really a good actress. I will admit that this movie did tackle the Phoenix Force a little better than The Last Stand, at least in terms of how the Phoenix Force works, but yet again, when you really look at the nitty gritty, her story arc is pretty much the exact same as X3, but it isn't particularly executed any better. And as for the rest of the X-Men, such as Cyclops, Storm, Nightcrawler and Quicksilver, they were just there for the sake of cool action scenes and nothing else. And it's especially disappointing from Cyclops because his relationship with Jean Grey should have been a major part of this movie, but instead it was just more of an afterthought. Plus, it doesn't particularly help that the two actors just have no chemistry whatsoever. And lastly, we have Jessica Chastain's character, who is by far the most bland, unoriginal, and just flat out the worst comic book villain I have ever come across. Her motives were completely generic, her character was forgettable, and not to mention that even despite of me seeing the entire film, I still don't know what her name is. And I legit had to research her name in order to know what her name was. And you know she is that bad when I can at the very least remember Steppenwolf's name. Now, like I previously mentioned just before, at the very least this movie did have some cool moments during action scenes in which we do get to see mutants use their powers in creative ways, but even then those are very few and far between, because the rest of the action is either worn out or is completely ruined by the terrible CGI in this movie. And this is especially apparent when you look at the last fight in the film, because much like with the Predator, the last act of this movie was completely reshot. At the end of the day, X-Men Dark Phoenix is just horrendous, and is the perfect example on how to not conclude the entire franchise. It was a miserable watch from beginning to end. They've completely ruined the Dark Phoenix Saga yet again, and even when you look at the ending, you could just tell that they didn't even care about the continuity that they have previously established in the previous movies, in which is something that I should expect by now, but this time they have really outdone themselves. Magneto and Beast were the only two characters who I actually enjoyed in this movie, and admittedly Hans Zimmer's score was relatively great and did improve the movie quite a bit, but even then, those aspects aren't enough to save this dead movie, and so for the final verdict for Dark Phoenix, I'm going to go ahead and give it a 3 out of 10. And if you ask me, I wouldn't suggest you even watch this movie and instead wait a couple years until the X-Men arrive in the MCU. So what do you personally think of Dark Phoenix? Did you think that this was a disappointing conclusion, or did you enjoy this movie much more than I did? Comment below and share some thoughts. And as always, thank you guys for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. Take care and have a good one.